Hi, everybody. This is James, and this week we're going to be talking about the principle of learning called sequence and the cool trick involved called backwards chaining. So, just wanted to remind everyone that sequence is part of the principles of learning category called the technical category, and also to point out that the actual principle of learning is just sequence. So, again, backwards chaining is really something else, and we're going to get to that. But what is a sequence? Basically, the sequence is just the order in which you teach something. It can be a process or a list. For this example, though, I've come up with kind of a four-step process that, well, some of you might know a little bit about, or maybe you don't. And basically, these are the four steps of baking cookies. So step one, in a very simple sense, is just assembling your ingredients, knowing what goes into a cookie. Step two is mixing the ingredients, so knowing how to put together a cookie. Step three is what temperature do you set the oven, and when do the cookies go in. Step four is when are the cookies ready and getting them out of the oven. So if you were teaching this to your students, there seems to be kind of a logical way to do it, right? You start at the beginning, go through the middle, and then you stop at the end. But that might not be the best way for all of your students to learn this. So backwards chaining is this idea that springs from the fact that we know when you're teaching something in sequence that there is a right way and a wrong way to learn it. So the first and last steps of a sequence are the ones that students are going to remember best. They have the biggest impact because they're the beginning and the end, the start of the lesson and the end of the lesson, when everything wraps up. All the steps in the middle are a little bit harder to remember, but the most difficult comes at just past the halfway point. So in our example, that would be step three, which is knowing when the cookies go into the oven and what temperature the oven has to be. So if you're running students through practice of this, you would really want to spend more time focusing on what temperature the oven should be, what the cookies should look like going in, when the cookies go in, when the oven's hot enough. And if you were, say, running them through drills, you would probably want to ask them questions about step three at better times in the sequence. So ask them, at the very beginning of the drill or the quiz, what temperature does the oven have to be? Ask them at the end, what should the cookies look like before they go in? The other part of backwards chaining is actually this way of teaching in which you go backwards through the steps and then work your way forward each time. So in the first lesson, you would introduce students to the idea of taking the cookies out of the oven, of knowing when they're done. And then once you've walked them through that, they get cookies. So at the next lesson, you start with step three. You start with when do the cookies go into the oven? What temperature does the oven have to be? What do the cookies look like? And then when you move on to step four, which is taking them out of the oven, this is more of a guided practice. You are there with the students while the students are doing it. So then the next lesson, you go to step two. You show them how to mix the ingredients together. Then you move from there to the cookies going into the oven, which you go through it with the students. They're taking the lead, but you're right there. And then when it's time to take the cookies out of the oven, that's up to the students. That is their independent practice. And then the last lesson, you go all the way to step one and proceed through the whole thing. So you show them how to assemble the ingredients. Then you go to step two, which is mixing, which the students handle, but you're right there to give them some pointers. And then everything involving the oven, that's all on the students. So is this always the best way to teach a sequence? Is this backwards chaining thing? Well, if you might have noticed, at every single step, those students got cookies. And so if your students are going to respond well to enjoying the rewards of their efforts immediately, that's a good time to use backwards chaining. Another time is if there's a really long sequence, like if you're teaching a vocabulary list and you have like 10 words, you want to use backwards chaining in order to make sure that all the students understand all of the words. So that's, having them drill each other, quiz each other, and making sure that they're doing it out of order, and then focusing on the ones that come in the middle, that they're more likely to forget. And then if the steps in something that you're teaching don't lead from one into the next, backwards chaining can be a huge, huge advantage to that. But the thing is, it's not always the right choice. And so when you want to use the standard method of you start at the beginning, go through the middle, and stop at the end, if the steps kind of flow into each other, or if you have to do step 1 in order to understand and complete step 2, in order to understand and complete step 3, or if it's just not a very long sequence. Like if you've got 3 vocabulary words, or you're showing them how to make Toll House cookies, which that's basically 2 steps: take out of package and put into oven and set timer. So I guess that's technically 3 steps, but that's still pretty short. So basically, backwards chaining is this great way to use sequencing to your advantage, but at the same time, don't get caught up in it. It's not always the right answer. Okay, so since this is my last video for the semester, I want to do a little something special, because I know we've been talking about cookies, and it's probably made some of you hungry. It makes me hungry every time I talk about cookies. So I wanted to share something with you, and basically it's for you guys. You can sit back and enjoy it. There you go, your very own cookie. For best effect, you might want to print that sucker out, and then it's yours to enjoy. So thank you, everyone, for listening to my videos, and I hope you all have a good week.